All right, welcome back. This is the home stretch, and we're looking at the. No, I don't want to call it that because that's not the argument. That's not our focus. We want to look at regulating the social media. Regulating the social media. Should that be or should it not be? Let's.
let's. You want to move away from? You can't move away from it.
Well, okay. Social media, the proposed social media bill. Yomi said we should stay there. Anyway, well, we're looking at that, and we have two gentlemen in the studio. One joins us from our Abuja studio, Mr. Basil Udotai, who's an IT lawyer. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And here in Lagos, we have Yinka Oyeniji, who's also a legal practitioner. Thank you for joining us.
All right, good morning, Lagos.
And the world. Okay, let's begin with you, Basil. The discussion's gone back and forth as regards the proposed social media bill, even though it's called proposed frivolous petition prohibition bill. Okay, thank God both of you are lawyers. But the other side of it is also the part where a lot of social media activists and indeed Nigerians have had to raise their voices, their concerns about an attempt to gag the citizenry. But what's your take?
Well, in relation to the social media law that the Senate is proposing, I actually have two positions. The first is that the provisions that they seek to legislate upon, if they are very studious of the laws that are passed in the country, they would see that those provisions are overtaken by events. If you look very carefully at the Nigerian Cybercrime Act, specifically Section 24(1)B, it has more pernicious provisions, if you ask me. So that's my first issue, which speaks to the lack of institutional memory in the Senate, and also the challenge of the fact that this Cybercrime Act has not been enforced. There's very little, even sensitization, which is also why you have a lot of people protesting against this. But the other issue is issue of policy. In technology law, you don't seek to create new laws without paying attention to what comparable legal situations are in your offline legal environment, for instance. I mean, we're a democracy. We have a constitution which guarantees to a very large extent freedom of expression and so on and so forth. So there's no way we can have that operating on the offline media, affecting structured and professional media organizations, and yet on the online environment, we craft a different law to apply to that environment. So those are the two major issues. The fact that we already have a law, which if the Senate paid attention, they would see that those laws, if enforced, would meet their requirements. Now, I'm not looking at the substance of whether the law is good or bad. The fact that it's there is something that someone should have paid attention to. Even the protesters, okay? So instead of focusing the protest on something that is potential, I think we should pay attention to the fact that this law is already in existence and people are being prosecuted in Nigeria already. There's a very popular case now going on in the Federal High Court in Lagos. Now, aside from that, we don't go into internet regulation without really understanding the nature of the thing and the parties, because the internet is a multi-party environment, the parties who we are trying to regulate, because this is content regulation. We don't have the legal environment that creates the legal basis for any government agency or any institution in this country to try to gag anybody, online or offline.
All right, let's come back to the studio. Yinka, he said that we already have laws that take care of this, and why do we need to have another? Is that your take too?
I beg to differ. The gentleman who it's my privilege to meet online on TV this morning is a deep thinker, all right, but I beg to differ, okay, with respect to us saying that we have multifaceted laws, all right. Truth of the matter is this: Internet itself is a product of evolution, okay? It's a product of dynamism. The world has evolved. The information gathering has evolved, okay? So we have to bring our laws up to date. What he may say, the only merit I can take from what he has said is the fact that we have a cybercrime act, okay, of offenses connected thereto. And I will say that even some will argue that that act is dead on arrival. It's the truth of the matter. Now, without meaning to erect a red herring, I'll say the truth to you. Even the Cybercrime Act will look as if it is verbose without tying it down to specifics. Whatever laws we may have had before now, there is no law that regulates social media. It's just the truth of the matter. I've taken my own time to read through that bill, which unfortunately wasn't circulated. I'm sure questions will come regarding that, and we'll deal with that at a specific time. But should we have that law? Yes, I think we should. The way they are going about it is a totally different question entirely.
So what way are they going about it that it's
well, first of all, you won't believe it. And then maybe today should be a day of hard knocks for our elected representatives, whether at the upper chamber or the lower chamber. With due respect to them, we already have in place something called the Freedom of Information Act. You would not believe it that today we still do not have an official copy of that bill anywhere. Nobody has it. What we have at best, online again, the same online which is regulating this, or which they want to regulate this particular law, is pictures. People took pictures of the bill and uploaded the pictures. If you go to the website of the National Assembly, you can't find that bill in contention. In fact, it has not been updated in recent times, number one. Number two, I read in the newspapers, and now I don't know what to believe anymore with the advent of this law, that a new suggestion box was put in place how many weeks ago that was said to, that got up to about 10 million or thereabouts. Now, if you have that and we have the Freedom of Information law, would it not have been different if all of us had copies? If we could look at copies of this law and then determine exactly what the contents are, and then we can write a memorandum, or they can organize a public hearing where we can all go and put our notions in place.
So if I get you well, you say it's okay to have the frivolous petition.
I will tell you, yes, if you want me to start.
Why do you think so?
Oh, loads of it. I stand firmly against. In fact, I want to pledge. I pledge to stand against trial by social media. It is wrong. It is what has been going on in the last about 18 months in this country, and it has put us in the quagmire we are now. The debate on the subsidy, whether we should have subsidy or not, started from the social media during the electioneering campaign. The 5,000 naira we are going to give students, or we are going to give unemployed graduates when we get into office, started from that. Whether the Vice President, Yemi Osinbajo, with due respect, learned senior colleague, stated that youths are not ready for governance, started from this same social media. You find people saying, this is my Twitter handle today, tomorrow they dissociate themselves from it. So to the extent that we keep having problems, to the extent that we keep having this albatross, to the extent that we still keep meeting at this crossroads, then it means that it is necessary for something to regulate the dissemination of information so that we can know what is true and what is not. Okay. The figures are mind-boggling for me. I can't even follow them anymore. But we get news on Facebook more than you get from anywhere else.
Mr. Dotai, from what Yinka is saying here, you said something earlier about not having enough infrastructure, so to speak, to regulate the internet. Now, coming in with this, it's not even properly phrased or put together to regulate the internet. How would that work out? Going by what he said about the entire situation, some of the rumors or judgment or court cases via the internet, and you saying we don't have regulations enough to even manage the internet space as it is?
Yeah, Mr. Gbe, thanks so much. I'm a technology lawyer, so when you're talking about regulation, I think of two things. I think of the law, and I think of the nature of technology. Is it possible to regulate the internet? And if it is, what are we regulating? Are we regulating content? Are we regulating the technology services organization that help facilitate the creation of content and the dissemination of content online? Because you have to tie it to something. Do you want to regulate the internet as a telecom service? Do you want to regulate it as broadcasting? Is it an IT service, or are you going to look at advertising? Because at the end of the day, you cannot regulate in vacuum. You have to find a legal structure upon which to base your regulation. But again, if you even have that sorted how about the nature of the internet itself? One of the most impactful social media organizations today that thrives on Nigerian content, Nigerian news, is not even a Nigerian company. It's based in New York. So if you have a Nigerian based regulation, how do you effect enforcement against this entity, for instance? If you want to regulate ISPs, which is what we're already doing now through intellectual property laws, because if you find an infringing content, you have a right to go to court and get an order which can be served against an ISP who will now bring that content down. It's called the pull-down order, all right? So my challenge is not that internet cannot be regulated. Several aspects of the internet is already being regulated, but regulating content is extremely difficult. The two major issues, two major challenging phenomenon online actually is the issue of attribution and the issue of anonymity. So attribution means if you have an infringing content or a content that you find undesirable, something that is controversial, who do you attribute that content to? And once you pass that attribution milestone, the next thing is to say, is this person subject to our jurisdiction? Before you even go to see whether the person has offended any law in your country. So it's not something that I mean, no matter the desire, no matter how desirous these issues are, I look at it only through the prism of law. And if you want to do this by regulating ISPs, how about protecting these guys to maintain a viable business? In the US, they have what they call safe harbor laws to ensure that ISPs are not tied in terms of criminal or civil liabilities to content that they put online. All right, because their work is to facilitate, the propagation of content. They are not content creators.